Back in the day, before streaming, before CDs, we listened to music on albums. A vinyl disc spinning 33 and a third revolutions per minute brought us great music one side at a time. 20 or so minutes of music, 4 or 5 songs usually, that created a single listening experience. This format exposed us to other songs of the artist, not just the hits, and often flowed in an order that was created to build and maintain or mold a musical experience for the listener.
Sideshow brings musical experiences from the past to life today. Here, we discuss and review individual sides of record albums we have grown to appreciate and hope you will too. Welcome to The Sideshow. All right, welcome to The Sideshow, everyone. Mark is going to be leading off this episode. Mark, why don't you let everybody know what you're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Today, we are going to take a look at the album The Long Run by the Eagles, Side 2 specifically. And I find this a really interesting album. This was a product of the kind of the aftermath of just what can only be described as just the massive commercial success of the Eagles. And it creates an interesting situation for the band, and it created some interesting music in what ultimately would be their last album before their first breakup, which went quite a while, and they ended up coming back and starting the notion of these classic rock bands doing these huge stadium concerts, and they're still performing at the Sphere in Las Vegas. But a lot of this really came from successes of the Eagles in the early years. And I guess before we dig into this album itself, let's talk a little bit about what led them to this point. The Eagles actually formed as a band in the early 1970s, 1971 in Los Angeles. The founding members of the Eagles were actually the backup band for Linda Ronstadt. It's how they met, how they first started playing together, and Glenn Frey, Don Henley, Bernie Leadon, and Randy Meisner, decided they'd form their own band. They, like Linda Ronstadt, came from a little background of a kind of a country twist to their rock and roll that they played, and the Eagles also started with a really strong sense of vocal harmonies, kind of in the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young tradition of mixing that in with some pretty good guitar and music that they had to create a unique sound that was theirs, and some that very rapidly caught on with some commercial success. Yes, go on, Mike.
You mentioned Bernie Leadon. He, I believe, was a member of the Flying Burrito Brothers, which was a band run by, or that the leader was Graham Parsons, who's sort of like the original country rocker. Not so much country rock, but he played country music, and it was real country music, but with more of a rock and roll ethos or attitude to it. And so I mean there's that, and so there's some there, the point you're making is there's some history there with Linda Ronstadt and whatnot, but some very deep roots in the sort of country rock that started to evolve in that era.
And it which is always interesting to look at in a band, kind of some of the roots and genealogy of how these bands came together, and the sounds that obviously influenced them. Coming forward, you gave a good example. It also, this type of connectedness to other musicians also helps connect these bands with good production crews and good arrangements with record companies and the recording studios, which in turn helps create a higher quality product that that gives these bands the ability to be successful very early on, and that was certainly the case here. I mean, the Eagles, starting out on their kind of self-titled debut in 1972, they were able to crank out hits on every single one of their albums. Their first album had the songs "Take It Easy" and "Witchy Woman," which were became hits for the band. Their 1973 album "Desperado" had the title track of that, which became a hit for the band. And after that, in 1974, Don Felder joined the band as kind of a new addition to this group, and they came out with the album "On the Border," and that contained their first number one song, "Already Gone," which is a great song. I love listening to that, and the song "Best of My Love." Again, just kind of churning out albums that had hit songs, and of course, leveraging success with singles on the radio is what could really grow a band's appeal and success. And then, of course, in 1975, their first number one album, which was "One of These Nights," and it had the title track, "One of These Nights," also "Lion Eyes" and "Take It to the Limit." So just in this first group of albums, we've got some very commercial success rolling out, as well as some very popular songs that came out with each album.
When those, some of the songs that you've just been rattling off from some of the, "On the Border" and "One of These Nights," I mean, those were big hits.
Yes.
And, you heard those on the radio. I mean, the Eagles were, at that point, they were a big band.
Yes.
As far as popularity and just, their songs would play on the radio, you'd recognize them, broad appeal. So they were rocking and roll. I mean, they were doing very well.
Absolutely. And that culmination of work, led in 1975, okay, past the albums to this point, Bernie Leadon, who we talked about a little bit before, left the band, and Joe Walsh from the James Gang, as well as some solo success, came to the band. And it was right about this time in 1976 that they released their first greatest hits album. Now, as we'd said, we have gone through a number of hits that this band had getting to this point. And there's kind of a transition here from, kind of the Eagles, the early Eagles and their albums. And they bring it together in this greatest hits album, which was, to say the least, a phenomenal commercial success. It is, to this date, the best-selling album in U.S. album history, right? Bigger than Michael Jackson's Thriller. I mean, just this is a huge success, which talks about the kind of the culmination of their success to this point. I mean, a lot of greatest hits albums, by definition, have a lot of good songs on it, but this one in particular just really captured the attention of what at that time was kind of a really peak point of classic rock music, and what at the time was also kind of an album-oriented rock music.
Well, there was even on many greatest hits albums by most artists, you're going to have a lot of great stuff, but there's going to be some, whether you want to call them deep cuts or I mean, filler is maybe not necessarily the right word, but there is a bottom of the barrel with, eventually, and the Eagles' greatest hits it took, there were more great songs on the later albums, but they went all the way back to the beginning, and they were just able to. There was no filler, there were no clinkers, there was no like, oh well, when CDs came around, well, I'll just skip through that one. I mean, it was chock full of hits, stuff that you were familiar with, that you'd heard on the radio. It wasn't. It was the quintessence of a greatest hits album, because they were all great hits.
Yes, exactly. Really. And yeah, I think that a lot of bands, if you can get 5 or 6 songs that are hits over the last group of albums, that's enough to put together a greatest hits compilation. And then the bands would tend to, toss in a couple of their deep cut favorites or whatever, or maybe popular concert tunes that they played. But to your point, this was from start to finish a greatest hits that were in fact greatest hits. And I can remember actually from a family perspective, this was right before this kind of mid 70s was right before we really started acquiring albums and listening to a lot of music. But as that started, I can remember we were talking to our Uncle Bob, and we kind of just starting to purchase records and albums. And I remember asking him, what is your favorite album? And what he said was, this is back then, this must have been in about 1978 or something like that. He said the Eagles' greatest hits he thought was the best album that had come his way. And he listened to quite a bit of music, and at least at the time I said, well, that's one to pay attention to if he enjoyed it. And obviously that proved to be right. I mean, that song went, sold 38 million copies. Again, just massive success. And then it was immediately followed also in, very shortly, because while that was coming out, the Eagles were putting together the album Hotel California, which, as far as a non-compilation studio album, was their big one.
Yeah.
The big show. 1976 came out. This 26 million of this. Now, the Eagles' greatest hits was the best-selling U.S. album of all time. Hotel California comes in at number 4. Okay, so of all, I mean, no band has more than one 15 million plus albums except for the Eagles. They had the number 1, and then they had the number 4. And by the way, like number 2 is Michael Jackson Thriller, which hadn't even been released at this time. I think AC/DC Back in Black was and it also hadn't been released. The bottom line, you've got a band that has just come out with 2 home run financial success albums in the same year. By any standard, critical acclaim, success, these guys had arrived as a band. Now, Hotel California, I mean, anybody that has ever turned on a classic rock station is familiar with the songs. The song itself, Hotel California, is probably the most instantly recognizable song for anybody that grew up during this time period at all. There's some people that have just grown tired of it. It is played so much, but if a brand new classic rock radio station opens up, you can guarantee this song is going to play in the first hour of its stuff. It's it is just on the, when you think about classic rock, this was the time that this was really getting big.
There was something that actually occurred about 10 years ago in our house. My wife Beth and I were at a table. We were about to sit down and have supper, and my wife said to our son Adam, who was born in 2001, and she said, "Adam, please bring me my wine." And Adam, chip off the old block, says, "We haven't had that spirit here since 1969.
Yeah.
That happened. It happened.
That happened.
Yeah.
And it is the lyrics, the sound of the guitar, the guitar, the kind of dueling guitar solo at the end of that song, and a lot of the other material on that album as well. I mean, that is what's hard, but it's a great album.
Life in the Fast Lane and
Great
New Kid in Town.
Yep.
And there's other stuff on there. I mean, Victim of Love and that is a very solid album, and
yes,
worthy of its reputation.
And I'm absolutely sure that aside from that, we'll make our show an episode of that at some point. But I really think that as we look forward and you look at what this band was sitting on at the time, they toured extensively off of this. They got themselves into some of the problems that rock and roll stars with a lot of success and too much money and women falling all over them and that type of thing
Life
tend
in
to,
the
to
fast lane.
life in the fast lane began to catch up with them. But not only that, but the expectations of the record companies and their audiences, and then others anticipating what their next work would be, must have been tremendous on time. Like, what are you going to do next? Again, these two just back to back phenomenal successes, being on the top of the world, and being, you know, everybody talking about the fact that that's where they were. They were clearly holding the pliers at this time, and everybody was waiting for this next album, which was The Long Run.
And I can remember that. Because it's been a long time since I was waiting for a popular artist to come out with their next album. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, and that wasn't the end of that. I mean, there were, but I can remember that, the Eagles' new album, and no question, it was a big thing. Well, it's because like that was around the same time as like Led Zeppelin came out with
Mm-hmm.
In Through the Outdoor.
Yes.
And okay, Zeppelin's coming out with a new album, and it was right up there. I mean, it was the same kind of anticipation.
Absolutely, and it's one of these things where you're gonna be to the records. And I bought this very soon after it, after the album came out to give it a listen. And again, it's and how they were viewed at the time, and especially how this album was viewed looking back, is really strongly connected to how successful their previous albums had been. Both their previous albums had sold more than Led Zeppelin 4, sold more than Dark Side of the Moon, sold more than Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. Again, these are huge success that they had to follow up. Now, as we talk about the album, I do have the album here I'm going to show you, but before I want to look at the previous album, Hotel California. This was a gatefold album, and in the middle of it, you can see the band. I want to see, you can see the band kind of, they have arrived. They've just arrived at this hotel, and a lot going on, excitement, the party, and they are right in the middle of it. And you can see they've got a look of confidence on their faces that they know they have arrived. So we'll keep that picture in mind. Their next album was The Long Run, and I have the album here. This was actually anticipated being a double album. It was planned as a double album, and we'll get into a little bit about what happened with that. So it's a gatefold album, just very simple cover, back with the track listings for the two sides, and then this is the middle, and you have a very different look of this band at this time. You fast forward, and I mean, just a complete emotionless seriousness that is going on every single face of this band, and particularly Glenn Frey right in the middle. I mean, just a stone face for all of these guys. And if the picture in Hotel California shows what it's like to arrive, that picture shows how they feel having been there for a little while. And there was some interesting, Don Henley later described what it was like as they began to work on this album that got behind. Took them 18 months to record it, and it was expected to be delivered much more quickly than that. Don Henley described the band as completely burned out. Physically, emotionally, spiritual, and creatively exhausted. Breaking apart, imploding under the pressure of trying to deliver a worthy follow-up to Hotel California. This is not a guy that is thinking we were primed and ready to go to be making this album. And I'd imagine that if there hadn't been contractual stuff with the record company, the band probably would have chosen to take a year off from touring and try to get their act together before going into the studio to work this out. And I think that description that Don Henley just read out, it showed on the faces of those guys, in the inside of that album.
Well, and that songs don't write themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And since I retired, I've tried my hand at writing some essays and some articles and some things, uh, uh, and stuff doesn't. And I'm retired with just doing it because I feel like it, not under any
Mm-hmm.
particular pressure or artistic compulsion. And you get some ideas, and getting your thoughts down on paper. It's a process. It takes time. It takes effort, and that's just doing shit because I choose to. Not
Yeah.
like this is
Yeah.
my career, uh, uh, and as you said, kind of living life in the fast lane and being a member of one of the biggest bands on the planet and being out on tour and dealing with all that comes with that activity.
Yeah.
It takes it out of you.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
And that had an impact, not only on their ability to work together as a group, but again, that creative exhaustion was a big part. And that showed first in the fact that this was planned and announced to be a double album when it was first put together, announced that they were back in the studio working on this album. And the bottom line is they just could not come up with the songs to generate a double album. They, it wasn't there, and they had to bring in J.D. Souther, who had worked with them on some other albums, but Bob Seger as well, to help with some of the writing and the songs as well, to kind of get them over the finish line. And that was the case of a number of the songs on side two that we're gonna take a look at today.
Well, J.D. Souther had been connected with Linda Ronstadt back in
Mm-hmm.
the day, and there may have been a romantic connection between those two over time, but he did songwriting for Linda Ronstadt
Yep.
as well. So that's another like connection that they had that was of benefit to them.
Yeah, yeah, and again and they so to kind of help them get over the finish line here, and there was there was some infighting in the band, and they did, however, they got this album out. Now it was highly anticipated, and there was a lot of it commercially it sold well. I mean, it sold 8 million copies by the time all was said and done, and the initial kind of critical analysis of it was that it was pretty good. A
Hmm.
lot of the songs, there's kind of a different view and a more mature kind of sound coming out of them. As you look though at different places that look back and provide reviews a little later on, kind of in retrospect, the album was clearly a disappointment. And there was a lot of good stuff to the album. There was some songs that were popular on the radio. The title track, the song "I Can't Tell You Why," was played. The song "Heartache Tonight," which is it's the first song on side two that we'll talk about in a minute. I mean, these were on the radio. People were liking them, enjoying them, and the album sold well. So it initially, you take a look at it, it's like, okay, they've got an album here. But a lot of that, I think, was the excitement of waiting for it and some of the popularity. But in the end, people were hoping for more after what they'd been received from Hotel California in the previous work.
Well, not unlike in many ways Led Zeppelin's "In Through the Outdoor."
Yeah.
Very successful album, sold very well, and there are a number of great songs on that album. But there's filler.
Yes.
What I
Yes.
would consider filler on that album, and also just it wasn't quite, it just wasn't up to the standard. And we've already talked about on the border, one of these nights, Hotel
Yes.
California. I mean, we're talking they were big albums getting better each time.
Yes.
And so there was reason to be very optimistic about what was coming out. And
Mm-hmm.
so and the fact that it may not have in the long run, forgive me,
Yeah.
achieved that or maintained that standard or that upward trajectory, I mean, that's relative. It's not that
Yeah.
because it is. There's good material on the album.
Yes.
Great. Some of the songs are great songs.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, and we'll kind of turn to side two here. I think that side two holds together as a side very well. When, this, what's what we're about here, about, sitting down and, putting on side two. And, we start with the first song on side two is Heartache Tonight. And this is a, kind of a brawly kind of a hoedown type song that it's happy, we're out, it's festive, we're going out, and we're gonna get laid, right? I mean that is kind of the feeling to the song. It feels like a lot of people are in the room. You get a sense of some clapping along as the song starts. It's got kind of a little bit of a country fair kind of twang to it as it gets started, and then it moves into vocals, and it's just kind of like it's somebody's going to hurt someone before the night is through. Somebody's going to come undone. There's nothing we can do. They are talking about, look, we're out, we're drinking, we're partying, we're having a good time, and kind of with the theme of a lot of, hey, it's a summer night that's never going to end. You can really hear that in some of the lyrics here.
And I think "Heartache Tonight" is a great Eagles song,
Yes.
and I think it's a great song, just in general, but it's a great Eagles song. And I mean, this was, I think this one got the most radio airplay of any of the songs on the album, when it was first released. But it's definitely the Joe Walsh Eagles, or I should
Yes.
say the Eagles after Joe Walsh became a member.
Yes.
Because there's that because Joe Walsh added a little toughness to the guitar, a little more of a rock guitar sound. Don Felder, he was a rock guitarist, and he played good, rock lead guitar. But Joe Walsh he introduced a more bottom end rock and roll feel to the sound of the Eagles, and I think this is a great example of the after Joe Walsh became a member Eagles, rocking out, because I mean, rocking out isn't really the right term, but it's a great song, and
Yeah.
it's not unlike the Joe Walsh song from the movie Urban Cowboy, the All Night
Yeah.
Long.
Yes.
We get up early and we work all day. We put our time in because we like to stay up
Yeah.
all night long. I mean, this has that same kind of feel to it. It's
Yes.
like, hey, let's crack a beer because we're going out tonight, man.
Yeah. And this night is gonna last forever, last all summer long. And that whole notion, which really draws back, if you had any fun when you were in high school or college or whatever, out there on those summer nights partying, I mean, this draws back to that, those kinds of feelings when, and in most cases when it was just, this is not necessarily a big party that you've been looking forward to. It's more, no, it's Friday night, it's summer, we're out late, we're having a good time. It's just the way summer was. And on the same, so you feel this notion of, man, I hope this just lasts forever. Isn't this fun? We're all here, we're listening to music, there's chicks around, this is great. But the song is called Heartache Tonight. And it is like, look, these nights, they are fun. We want them to last forever, but they always end in heartache, right? Always, right? It's the with the few exceptions. There's the guys that go home without getting laid. There's the girls that go home getting laid and didn't want to in the first place. There's the bad relationships and bad things. There's you lost your wallet because you were too drunk to do this. You threw up in front of your parents when you got. I mean, there's going to be some heartache tonight, right? One way or another. And I think this is a reflection of the larger theme of, yeah, we've been partying now for 3 straight years. It is what the band's and touring. And this is kind of how it all seems to end. There's, one way or another, there's going to be a heartache. We're going to get into a fight with each other. We're going to have legal troubles. We're going to, X, Y, and Z have to do a stint in rehab. Whatever it is, it's like we seem to start out and everybody's having a good time, but it always seems to end the same way. And that's also an absolute part of this song.
I mean, I can't really push back on that. On the one hand, but this isn't a cautionary tale.
Oh no.
This is more of a nothing ventured, nothing gained type tale.
Totally agreed. It's the cost of doing business.
Yeah. If you can't, if you're gonna go out and find everybody wants to touch somebody. Okay, well, sure. I mean that's true, but if it's like, if you're going to go out and meet Mr. Right or Miss Right, it ain't going to be the first one you meet. And so you got to go out there and mix it up. And that's going to result in failure. But talking about the heartache, I mean, the lyric that I remember, that struck a chord with me was that, sometime before the sun comes up, the radio is going to play that song.
Yes.
And to me, that was always, there was let's say there was a particular song that reminded you of a girl you had the hots for, whether that was because she was willing to dance with you at the school dance to that song, or it's a song that you heard on the radio and you thought, well, that song kind of describes how I feel right now about her, or whatever. Yeah. I mean, but just that, sometime before the sun comes up, the radio is going to play that song, and you're sitting there and the song starts playing, and you get melancholy, and you feel the heartache.
Exactly. And I feel the same nerve with that. For that particular line, they were important to say that this is sometime before the sun comes up. It's not sometime before closing time. I mean, the bar's already closed. It's 3-4 hours later, and you haven't achieved what they talk about in the song. A little later on in the song, they say, we can beat around the bushes, we can get down to the bone, we can leave it in the parking lot. Now, there's maybe some ways. It sounds to me like somebody's getting laid there, right? In that one, but a lot of people didn't get down to the bone, and it's the sun is going to be coming up soon, and yes, that song is going to play that reminds me of this time or this girl I had or whatever. And yes, to your point, therein lies the heartache.
Yeah. No, I mean it's a great song.
Oh yeah.
I mean, because it's despite the fact that it's pointing out an unavoidable fact of life that but it's nothing ventured, nothing gained, and it also kind of acknowledges the sort of the fun. Fun. I mean, you go out and you have one bad night. You don't not go out and party the next night or the next weekend because, in this particular game, most of them are nights where there's going to be a heartache.
Exactly. No, and as I said before, I also see it's like you're absolutely right. This is in no way saying, look, don't get together with your friends and go out and have a good time. I think it is, though, there is a cost of doing business in this, and pay the toll, right? In the end, it'll be worth it. Because more often than not, and this is the interesting thing, I mean, looking back on those kind of nights, and we had plenty of them when we were younger, you tend to remember that this night is going to last forever, last all summer long, more than you remember that heartache right before you were falling asleep, and which is at our point probably better off, right? That's the way that rolls out. But again, a powerful start to the side again. A foot tapper. It's a moving song, and I'd agree. It's an upbeat It's an
I,
upbeat song.
I think the strongest song on the album,
Mm-hmm.
personally, as a Beatle as a not Beatles Eagles song, as an Eagles
Yeah.
song, it's the high point of the album.
Oh, absolutely. And a great start to this side. Kind of get things up and positive, and tapping your foot or clapping your hands or whatever you need to do. And so we transition from that to a song that switches gears a little bit. It's called "Those Shoes," and it's a slower. The beat is a lower, kind of slower, more driving, kind of just focuses a lot on the rhythm section. You've got some bass and the drums, and it's kind of a bono 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 kind of a dark kind of driving to it. You get some talk box here from Joe Walsh that kind of adds and goes underneath the song here. It's talking about a girl or a young woman starting to come on her own and gain her independence, going out in, you can picture like the LA scene or that type of thing. And those shoes, you can look at it as like, okay, well, you get to a point where you're wearing high heels or that type of thing, and there's a sexy look to that. And I really think they're more focusing on a woman that's standing on her own 2 feet. Is really it. They use this more as a metaphor of someone who's really starting to gain their independence. And this is a combination of, you're kind of leveraging the tools that you have to look good and to look confident, but to try to be independent in a world that is going to be, men that just want to put their hands on you. All they want to do is touch you and touch it. They've got their own desires and things that they want, which is going to be a little bit different than what this woman wants. At the same time, the lyrics talk about the power that the women do have about choosing, right? Whether it be the guy that they want or the thing that they want to do, and they're kind of hammering that home as well.
My take on this song was, it's about a woman like you describe, who kind of decides that she's going to put her best foot forward in terms of her appearance, the way she dresses, etc. But she kind of wants to have it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
She or have her cake and eat it too, so to speak. She wants to kind of be, move up to or she wants to move into that circle, so to speak. But she wants to be treated, kind of like the more modest. She wants to find just, like a nice guy who'll treat her well, as opposed to one of these, the sort of guys that move in those circles.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I think this song is a cautionary tale, and the shoes, with the pretty little straps around your ankles and those shiny little chains around your heart, bling and stuff. It's like, if what you're putting out there is superficial, though attractive, don't be surprised if you get shallow desire rather than genuine affection or respect.
yeah. And it's the oh no, you can't do that once you started wearing those shoes. So
Yeah.
to your point, you put your self into this position. Some of the other things about just wanting someone to talk to, and kind of falls off. You're not going to achieve that once you start wearing those shoes. I think this, though, it does highlight this, a dilemma or an impossible choice that a lot of women face in these situations. It's like you can't even get into the door of any type of conversation unless you present yourself with a certain type of appearance. And then that, which is the key to entry. Again, just to get into the conversation. I mean, you go into some of these bars and that type of thing. If you don't have that look, nobody is going to look twice at you. But there doesn't seem to be any middle ground between that and just saying, look, I'm looking for the first guy that'll walk up and buy me a drink, and then, we'll go upstairs and have sex. Right. I think that understandably, women are looking for something in between those two. And it's hard. It's hard to find that, especially in the LA scene that the Eagles were involved with these clubs and this type of thing. So yeah, I agree. It is more of a cautionary tale. But they do allude a couple times in the song to, you've got some choices here. Use them, to your advantage, because you get whatever you choose is also something that they say in the song. So be careful. Be careful what you're choosing.
Well, and and the lyrics don't spare the men. I mean, they say basically, you're going into an environment where, they're looking at you, leaning on you, tell you anything you want to hear. They give you tablets of love, which if I had to, bet a paycheck, I think they're talking about quaaludes.
Yeah,
or back
or
back in
other
those
type
days.
of date rape, drugs,
I mean,
or roofies, or whatever you want to call it.
That's it. And so they're kind of saying like, hey, and this is an all male band, and they're singing a song. The song is being sung to a woman. And they're saying, hey, here's if this is where you're going to go, here's what you're going to find.
Yeah. I agree with you. They absolutely aren't trying to be kind to the men here. I mean, the jerk offs in their fancy cars. Absolutely, I'd agree. And it really is. It is more of a commentary on the whole scene than anything else. But desperation in the singles bars was a reality in the especially in the 70s, and this song talks about it. And again, it's a lower tone, deeper kind of song, and it has some Joe Walsh guitar on there that's good, but not an overly happy song.
Well, and the you've already mentioned the talk box, which is it's a big part of this song.
Yeah.
And Joe Walsh had been using a talk box for a long time. I mean, one of his solo albums, The Smoker You Drink, The Player You Get, had Rocky Mountain Way on it.
Yeah.
And there was talk box on that. And another late 70s artist, Peter Frampton, his live album Frampton Comes Alive had talk box guitar on it. And so that was something that kind of found its way out into the popular top 40 type music back in those days, and it gives it a unique sound.
Yes.
I mean, you knew that Joe Walsh was in the band on this one as well.
And I think that when you talk about Peter Frampton, I think Frampton used that talk box a little bit differently than Joe Walsh did. It created a sound that was familiar in that time, but it's almost like Frampton was using it to make a voice, like a distortion to a voice, and Joe Walsh used it to make a distortion to the guitar. Again, it's kind of and you really. The best way to understand that is just to listen to the music, because it's hard to describe. But again, kind of an example when a side is switching gears a little bit as you move along. We started with a very lively track in Heartache Tonight. We go to Those Shoes, which was just a deeper. It moved along, but just a kind of took a step down. And then the next song is called Teenage Jail. Now, this is actually my favorite song on this album. I just enjoy this song. This is also not an upbeat, a clap your hands type song. But it's got a pretty heavy kind of riff that gets the song going, and then it's teenage jail. That is really a pretty good descriptor. You can imagine what it's like. I mean, being a teenager, especially in the '70s, had a certain aspects of jail to it. There a lot of rules you still had to follow, none of which you wanted to, but you're boxed in by your parents, you're boxed in by the rules at school, and these crazy cops that were always trying to find you when you had a 12 pack of beer in the back of the car. You were boxed in, especially by society and classes and cliques and girls and this type of thing. It was hard to not turn somewhere and not run into a wall of things that either you weren't supposed to do or things you thought you couldn't do because it would impact you socially or that type of thing. And you wait for the weekend to go off the deep end, and everything like is presents some problems in those years.
Well, and I think the song is it's not about juvie detention.
No,
That's
no,
not what it's about.
no.
I mean, I think clearly the song is about those aspects that you've been talking about, a teenage life in the late '70s, that could seem very confining, and that as a teenager you wanted to break out of. And as far as the riff, it's very much like Dazed and Confused.
Yep, yep.
Is what it's like, and the Led Zeppelin song, and like the title to the movie, which was about teenage life in the '70s. The movie Dazed and Confused.
Yep.
I mean that movie, for example, there's a scene where they go out to the beer party in the woods, and it was like in a park. I mean,
Yep.
how much like Tallulah Park in Appleton was that scene
Yes.
like?
Oh yeah. Yep.
So I can't help but think that they weren't aware that there were similarities between the riff, the guitar in Teenage Jail and Dazed and Confused.
Yes. I would agree, and I also think though in that notion you kind of were leading there about what things were like when we were in high school. First of all, at that time in the late '70s, at our age, I would put some money down that we had more freedom than any generations before us or after us.
Yeah.
I mean, the stories are kind of, people don't want to hear anymore about how, we left the house after breakfast and didn't come back until the evening time, and our parents didn't have any idea where we were. I mean, that is the way our days in the summer anyway were. You complete freedom. The idea of at a very early age it was your older brothers and sisters that were supervising you at the park, or the older neighborhood kids that made sure you got brought into the baseball games or kick the can or whatever they were. But we had an incredible amount of freedom. And later on in high school, as seniors, I mean, we growing up in Wisconsin, we had an 18-year-old drinking age when we were still seniors in high school. And again, what that provided us from of now going into adult activities when we were still in our teenage years. Yet this song still resonated about how boxed in we felt. I mean, I can't even imagine in today's day and age where kids can't even, for the most part, until they're what we would consider very old, even go to the park by themselves anymore. Just the way that society has structured things. And then throw in social media. It's like, oh my God, we didn't have to contend with any of that, yet we still clearly saw the constraints that we had. And this song really kind of talks about those. And it's kind of in a driving way, I agree, Dazed and Confused is how it gets going. And as the song continues on, it actually turns into almost a gospel kind of song and response that comes out. It's like, they don't even know you, and then this guy's like, They don't even know you. And it's got just kind of this almost kind of spiritual or gospel feel as it moves in, and then some what I think is very good guitar that begins to roll as well as this song comes to an end. So I really think it's a great song, and reminds me of some of the frustrations that used to feel about just not being able to do what you want or say what you want in different situations when I was younger.
The and I agree with you on the point that the late '70s was really kind of a peak of really freedom for as a teenager, relatively speaking, with certain
Yes.
things. And I can still remember as a parent the time. I mean, I can still remember the moment. I mean, I don't remember what date it was or anything or where I was, but I can remember thinking, I'm going to be more strict with Aaron and Adam than Mom and Dad were with me and Mark and
Yeah.
Tom. Remember, I'm going to be more strict with my kids than my parents were with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a that's a eye-opening revelation. And our daughter, who's 25 now, was over the other night, and we were talking about things. It was my wife is out of town, so it was just the two of us, and it's just an entirely different environment now. Growing up as a teenager, and there are aspects of that are there were aspects of the way things were in the late '70s that are better than they are now, and there are aspects of the way things are right now that are better.
Yeah.
And that's a topic that kind of transcends this podcast, but it really I agree with you that this song does a good job of sort of capturing some of the more morose aspects of being a teenager in the late '70s. Not feel they're not like your mothers. You're not like your mothers. You're not like the others. You're not quite like anyone else. That feeling of isolation that occasionally came about. Not all. Not even most of the time. But it does some of it pretty well. And the guitar at the end. I mean, there's like a synthesizer solo, and then I believe it's a Don Felder guitar solo at the end, which is it's a pretty fierce rock guitar solo. It really is.
And I get it's kind of a good solid center point for the side as it comes in again. I think there's some power to both the vocals and the synthesizer and the guitar, and it just I like it. It's kind of a great song to listen to. Again, not a foot tap and put a smile on your face. What's
no triumph of the human spirit.
No, not in there. Now, we do move on to a song that's a little more lighthearted and fun as we advance to the fourth song on the side, which is "The Greeks Don't Want No Freaks." And this song is
it's fun.
It's fun. It's a fun song. It gets moving, just kind of a down 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 down, almost kind of a corniness to it. And as the songs get started, there was beer all over the dance floor, and the band was playing rhythm and blues. Again, frat party type atmosphere is very clear, and there's a rowdiness. And you can kind of hear some people like and kind of screaming, and the type of thing that you'd hear in the background at a party. So very much like that type of atmosphere that takes you through the song.
Kind of like it's like a mid-'60s garage rock type stuff, like Louie Louie or Double Shot of My Baby's Love. With that, because there's that sort of Farfisa organ type
Yeah.
sound in there.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. And I mean, and the frat party obviously being the kind of the background. And I have to tell a story about this song. When I was in college, my second year in college, I lived in a dormitory my freshman year, but as sophomore I lived in a in there was this in Minneapolis, this big 3-story house that was separated into two, like, sides, two units.
Mm-hmm.
And me and 5 other guys were in one side, and then there were some other guys, 4, 5, 6 guys living in the other side. And we didn't spend a lot of time mingling between the sides of the house. But one of my roommates was Diedrich, our friend Diedrich, who and
Yeah.
some other guys who were kind of on the same weirdness scale as Diedrich. And
So that's on the
the
weirder side. Yes. Yes.
and the guys that lived on the other side were more like frat guys.
Yeah.
I mean, and when we were moving in, and they weren't bad guys,
Yeah.
but the first guy that I met, you always shake hands. Yeah, I'm Mike, and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And one of his questions was, upon just meeting this person, so you lift, and I'm like, what does it look like? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so in any case, though, the guys on our side of the house, we were going to have a keg party. And we mentioned to the guys, like, hey, on Saturday, whatever the date was, we're thinking about having a party and blah blah blah. And so you guys can feel free to come. And we mentioned that we were going to put an ad in, whatever the campus paper was at U of M. And the same guy who asked me if I lifted was saying, "Oh no, when we, we like, a lot of and he actually said, we like a lot of Greek people, meaning fraternity and sorority
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
to hang around with." And he said, "Oh, and if those, if they see that you're advertising a party in the paper, they won't even bother. They'll say, oh, these, no, so don't do that." Well, I didn't take out the ad, but one of the guys, went and took out the ad, and the ad said, "The freaks don't want no Greeks. Antisocial event of the year. Come and get loose." And then it had the address, the date. And so that was
The freaks don't want no Greeks.
so anytime I hear this song, I think about that party. And it was a good one. And we actually, and those guys actually, there was this, like, big double door that you could slide open, and they actually at some point, even though they knew that we'd put, they took the snub, they opened up the thing and they hung out. It was all right, but
there's always this interesting mix between the Greeks and the not Greeks in college life, especially because both the Greeks and the freaks tend to like to party, and you kind of get this notion. I can see, like, the voice in this, or speaking from the perspective of, say, a band that is playing at a fraternity party, and hey, look, they're providing the music, but it's very clear the Greeks don't particularly want no freaks. They like the music, but that's where it ends. But there are also some there's some advantages to being the freaks instead of the Greeks that they talk about here. The band itself and the song pokes a little bit of fun at some of the people that attend these things, but they talk about this girl in here who was the pride and passion of Dixie. She did exactly what her daddy had planned. She was the perfect little sister until somebody missed her, they found her in the bushes with the boys in the band. And it's just now I've heard, you read things that there's some allusions to this was like a gang rape scenario that, quite frankly, you heard about those things at Greek parties. I don't think that's what this was at all myself. I just think this was the women at the party were much more inclined to go into the bushes with the boys in the band as opposed to anybody at the party. And they also, poked a little bit of fun at maybe the drinking capacity of some of the Greeks that were there. The song starts out with, you got down and did the gator, and half an hour later you were barfing all over your girlfriend's shoes. And the gator being a dance that at a Florida fraternity they certainly would have been doing during these parties. I understand some people in the Eagles had some connections to the Gainesville campus there, and so doing the gator was something they were familiar with. So the bottom line, though, the song is a fun song. It moves along. You can tap your feet, sing. It's a sing along type song. Pretty simple lyrics, and it always comes down to the fact that the Greeks don't want no freaks.
There you have it.
And so again, we've kind of, as a lot of well put together sides do. This particular side has moved around a lot. Had some heavy, had some fast moving and light and funny, and the song actually ends with a song called "The Sad Cafe." This is a much softer, mellower, sadder type song that caps off not only the side but the album. And again, this is a side that's had some. It's a quiet way for the side to come to an end. A lot of pretty popular song as far as people look back on this album and some of the songs that they like. I think it's a well done song. It's a nice it's a nice song, and it does the Sad Cafe and the way that they talk about it. I've actually read a couple different things about what the band thinks about this song, but the bottom line is they used to hang out at some places in LA, the Troubadour and some other places like that they look back now, right, now that they've achieved this success, that was a completely different time for them. At the time, it was the world held some promise. There was a lot that they could do. Words like love and freedom meant a lot to them at the time. At the same time, you get a sense and a feeling that back then, when they were still going to the Sad Cafe, they could sense that something was ending, right? Kind of like as you're approaching your last weekends in your college, career, for example, right? The sun is out now, finals are coming, you're ready, you're going to be graduating, and yes, you're having fun. You're trying to, soak in what you can, but there's a feeling like this is all ending. And I really get a sense that as they talk about the Sad Cafe in this song, they're looking at a period in their lives from earlier on when there was a lot of promise that they were focusing on. And there were some things that worked out and some things that didn't. Some people that had their dreams met, some people that didn't. That's what you can hear this through the lyrics of the song. But they realized at the time that something was ending, and it did. This song is about looking back to those times and kind of a longing to go back there from time to time.
I think this is a wonderful song. I think it's really a great way to end the album and kind of end their career, really, as a practical matter. And it made me think of the song, the Don Henley song from his solo years, the Down at the Sunset Grill.
Yeah.
Where you're talking about like a bar and grill where basically people are hanging out and they're dreaming about being somewhere else or that there's a better life that is going to be coming. But, meanwhile, let's, have another beer. And but that was kind of the setting in the early days when, as you say, the band was first hanging out there. And
Mm-hmm.
that was back in the days when they were first meeting people like Linda Ronstadt and
Yep.
JD Souther, and there were all sorts of people hanging out in these different places, who had dreams of success in whatever, in
Yep.
success in life, success in music, success in love, and all those things. Now, and the Eagles ended up succeeding, and they ended up going on and everything. The um uh but so then they think back, and I believe that they're thinking, well, there's some people that were hanging out in those places that are still hanging out in those places.
Yes. Yeah.
They're still showing up on, open mic night with their guitar, and that's it, and then, maybe, meeting somebody over a drink afterwards, that's kind of what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Not necessarily by choice. And the verse that goes, the clouds rolled in and hid that shore. Now that glory train, it don't stop here no more. Now I look at the years gone by and wonder at the powers that be. I don't know why fortune smiles on some and lets the rest go free. That the at the beginning of the song, it refers to the tracks that ran down the boulevard have all been washed away,
Yeah.
and that made me think, the boulevard of broken dreams is
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
that's why it's the sad cafe, because I think that there's sort of a fond memory of those days, and they
Yeah.
enjoyed being in that place, and in some ways maybe think that life was simpler and easier,
Yeah.
and in those days. But here they are, and life has actually been fairly good to them, but it hasn't been that way for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's not so bad for the people that are still there, because of some of the reasons why there are things that accompany fame and success that we were talking about, earlier, about the Beatles, and or not the Beatles, the I keep calling them the Beatles, the Eagles.
Well, the Beatles
And
experienced
yeah,
some of the same things. I mean, the
yeah.
pressure and
Um,
expectations of success cause problems.
but it's the idea of that idea of yearning for more,
Yeah.
and those yearnings began in the sad cafe, or what they're referring to as the sad cafe. And why don't you meet me at midnight, baby, inside the sad cafe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um uh uh
And that and it the way that those lyrics play with the music, I think it's very well done. The song is very well done. The music is very appropriate to the message. You can feel the lyrics in the music, which is not always the case with, with bands. And I do think in that passage that you cited, I think they were very intentional about the wording. I don't know why fortune smiles on some. So
yeah,
the Eagles, fortune smiled on them and lets the rest go free, right? That they were the free ones. The Eagles were now going to be forever, for the rest of their life, locked in by the success that they'd had with Hotel California, their greatest hits, that type of thing. You can't mention the name Glenn Fry without thinking the Eagles and what they did. And nothing that they were going to do was ever going to change that, right? From, they now have, they might as well have the Eagles and Hotel California tattooed on their faces, because that is how they were going to be compared and measured and recognized for the rest of their life. And that certainly wasn't what they were thinking when they were back in the Sad Cafe years ago, when life was full of potential and opportunities.
yeah.
And you just can kind of feel that as well. I think they are thinking, man, life was a little bit simpler, a little bit easier. Just like for us, spending those early summer nights sitting on the terrace had a
Yeah.
pretty easy way of going down.
Yeah. No, I think it was an excellent way to end the album, and that that sax solo at the end,
Yeah.
I believe Dave Sanborn, who was he was kind of a hotshot session musician back in those days. Really, really, and again, there's that ambiguity there. It's called the Sad Cafe, but there's sort of there's fond
Yeah.
memories of those days, and like you say, sort of a suggestion that there's pluses and minuses to the various paths that people end up having to take because of fate and circumstance, or poor
Hmm.
choices or good choices, and there's nothing wrong with counting your blessings.
Absolutely. And to your point, a really what ultimately became the Eagles' last song. And I mean, they had some reunions and that type of stuff, but I mean, it
Yeah.
nothing that formed a part of this body of work that was the Eagles. Again, there was kind of a Joe Walsh Eagles and a pre-Joe Walsh Eagles, but this period was, I mean, they were incredibly influential and incredibly important in music, and this song kind of ended the record, and ultimately their
Yeah.
run in this particular situation.
Yeah. And a good choice it was.
All right. Well, hey, great conversation, great side, and we'll look forward to talking through the next one, Mike.